tremendous amount of rejection from my family at this time because, it was like I'd been saved already for about 15 years by now. And my family had come to accept that I had become a Christian, even though they were never happy about it, but they accepted it. But then when I pursued the ministry, then everything changed. It was like it all started all over again, the rejection and stuff. And I had one of my relatives, I told him that I was going to go be a missionary. And he said to me, he says, well, you pray to Jesus, but I'm going to pray to Allah that you get shot in the head when you're over there.
Oh boy.
And it was such a strong attack, and I went into a real deep depression at that time, and I think it was also kind of midlife crisis. I was about 30 years old at the time. And, combined, all those things combined, just I felt like such a failure, such a loser. I've never experienced rejection in such a strong way. It was so overt. It was so, it wasn't violent physically, but it was emotionally. It was very, powerful. And so.
Well, this wouldn't be easy. No, because this isn't going to go over well. You're hitting heavy opposition here. You step into that. It would take a miracle for some of this.
Yeah. That's why I think about, so many times you just think, you think, now, is this real? Is what happened to me real because this pain that I'm feeling is so real, and I think that's why the Lord gave me such a powerful salvation experience, because I can always look back at that and I can't deny what happened there in spite of all the pain that I felt, from my family. But then eventually I wanted to go back to the Middle East as a missionary. The Lord did not open the door for me to do that until 1999. And I went back and I was ministering there.
Where did you go? What part of the Middle East?
Well, my family is Palestinian.
Okay.
And so I went to, the Palestinian territories. And the, one thing I did, I went and started preaching. I started preaching on the street, like I did here in America. I'd go out on the street and preach every Friday night and stuff. So I went there and did the same thing, and then every day I kind of had a goal that I just wanted to speak to 10 people, about the Lord, 10 Muslims, and I knew how they would react. I knew they would reject me, but I just wanted to plant the seed in their heart. And, because if you plant the seed, the Lord can work with that. The Apostle Paul said, some plant, some water, but the Lord gives the increase. So I just wanted to plant the seed because I know a lot of them haven't heard the gospel, or they only heard what the Islam says about Jesus. So I just would go out every day and just talk to people. And after a few months, I was threatened. I received a letter threatening me, saying, that I needed to stop doing what I was doing. But I didn't stop. I kept going out and preaching. But then I got a phone call, and it says, listen, we'll give you 2 hours to stop, to leave the city, or we're going to come get you.
Oh, boy.
And so, Jesus said, if they persecute you in one city, go to the next. And so that's what I did. I went to the next city, and I lived in a city in Israel where, it was safer because it was in Israel. Mm-hmm. And I continued ministering there. I continued going out and preaching. I go sometimes to mosques and stuff and just share the gospel. And people were almost always nice. There was one time, and then this was written about in the Los Angeles Times, where some guys told me, they said, hey, we want to talk to you about Jesus. And they told me that they had become Christians, that they were secret believers like me. That they were Muslims who had accepted the Lord, but that they were secretly believers because they were afraid.
Mm-hmm.
And so they asked me, come, bring your guitar and stuff. And, because I have a guitar, I used to lead worship with them. And they said, come bring your guitar and let's sing some songs to Jesus tonight, and everything. And because of the rejection that I had experienced in that city, I was real happy to go. So I went that night. And when I went there, it was in a store, and then they closed the store. And then one of them, it was my friend, I thought he was, he grabbed the cross on my neck, and then he yanked me up off my chair and then threw me back down on the chair. He said, I could go to heaven right now for killing you. And I'm thinking this guy was a believer, and then he slapped me and started kicking me. He says, you're a fool. You're being used by the Americans, and
you were
I
set
couldn't
up.
believe it was happening. Yeah, it was a setup, and there were 3 guys there, and I really believed they were going to kill me. I thought they were going to kill me, but they beat. The one guy was beating me up, and he just beat me up a little bit. And then he stopped, and then everybody got silent. And when they got silent, I just stood up, and I said, "Can I go?" And nobody said anything. So I went for the door and scrammed out of there as fast as I could. And then the guy came back because I had my guitar, and he came yelling, says, "Come get your guitar," And I didn't want to get my guitar. I just want to leave, But he brought the guitar out to me, and then he grabbed my hand. He grabbed my hands, both of my thumbs, and started pushing back on my thumbs. And he says, "Say there is no God but Allah." And I said, "There's no God but Allah." And he says, "Say that Muhammad is his messenger." And I said, "I can't say that." And then he beat me up some more. But the guy gave me the guitar, and they let me go. And I ran to Jerusalem, and I was able to get away. And anyway, they wrote about this in the Los Angeles Times a few years ago, and this was in 1999. And so that was the first physical time that I got beat up, and it happened again a few months later. I was preaching in one city, and then the guy just came up and grabbed me and started beating me up. And again, I had to run. I ran, and I had to run to Jerusalem. And I did, and then, but I kept, working there, and, the Lord just did so many wonderful things, in spite of all the hardship. There was so many wonderful things happening, and I felt this is what God wanted me to do. And so I stayed there, and I stayed there for 9 years. And then, one of the things that happened was that, there were some other, I ministered mostly to young men who also came to accept the Lord while I was there. There was one young man, and I've written these are some of the stories that are in my book, Out of Darkness into Light. And the book is available on Amazon. If anybody wants to buy it, you get it as a Kindle book. But there's this one young man. I was walking around Jerusalem one time, and I saw this young man. He was sitting drinking beer, and I just went up to talk to him about the Lord and stuff. And I said to him, I'm just telling people about Jesus. Could I talk to you? And then he asked such an interesting question. He just said to me, he said, "How could I live that life?" That was such an interesting question. Apparently he had heard about the Lord before. But he said and he's Muslim, but he was drinking beer, which Muslims don't drink. They're not supposed to. But I just shared the gospel with him, and he accepted the Lord right there, and just, and then what happens, we kind of fell out of touch, because I lived in another city, but he found his way to another believer that was a friend of mine, and so he started going to him and they started discipling him and taking him to church and stuff like that. But then what happened to him is that one day, because his family is very big in his village, and they're very big in Islam, they're like leaders in the mosque.
Oh boy.
And one day he was on a ladder painting a window, and and while he was painting the window, a car drove by and hit the ladder to where he fell down and broke his leg. And they took him to the hospital and stuff. But he said while he was in the hospital, he says nobody came to visit him. And he said he felt so alone. But then he said all of a sudden he felt God come into the room. And he just said that the Lord was with him. And he said, I knew somebody was in the room with me. And he said it just made it all worth it. And he suffered a lot, but he continued walking with the Lord, and then I'm just telling you some of the stories that are in the book. There's
right.
Just stop me whenever you want.
No, I mean, that's the interesting part is the fact you had to overcome a lot here, and even your success stories are going to have to go through a tremendous amount of friction, or these people are, we've all heard about Muslims here. Of course we have.
Yeah.
You can't get past it. And not all of them are like this ISIS bunch. We know that too. I live down the street from the Hindus and Muslims and everybody else. We don't have any of those kinds of problems here. I'm just saying. But if I went over now and tried to do what you're doing, I'm sure they're going to have some problems. I was going to bring up though, we talk a little bit here in the introduction about dreams and miracles. When on our site sacredcombat.com, it was just not very long ago, there was story after story after story of conversions. Droves of Middle East Muslims. It was Muslim refugees converting in Germany. That's a miracle by itself. So